The Outermost House, A Year of Life on the Great Beach of Cape Cod by Henry Beston. Chapter 5, Winter Visitors. Section 1. During the winter, the world of the dunes and the great beach was entirely my own, and I lived at the forecastle as undisturbed as Crusoe on his island. Man disappeared from the world of nature in which I lived almost as if he too were a kind of migratory bird. It is true that I could see the houses of Eastham village on the uplands across the marsh, and the passing ships and fishing boats, but these were the works of man rather than man himself. By the middle of February, the sight of an unknown someone walking on the beach near the forecastle would have been a historical event. Should any ask how I endured this isolation in so wild a place and in the depth of winter, I can only answer that I enjoyed every moment to the full. To be able to see and study undisturbed the processes of nature, I like better the old biblical phrase, mighty works, is an opportunity for which any man might well feel reverent gratitude. And here at last, in this silence and isolation of winter, a whole region was mine, whose innermost natural life might shape itself to its ancient courses without the hindrance and interferences of man. No one came to kill, no one came to explore, no one even came to see. Earth, ocean, and sky, the triune unity of this coast, pursued each other their vast and mingled purposes as untroubled by man as a planet on its course about the sun. It is not good to be too much alone, even as it is unwise to be always with and in a crowd. But solitary as I was, I had few opportunities for moods or to lose and neglect the creeping hours of time. From the moment that I rose in the morning and threw open my door looking toward the sea, to the moment when the spurt of a match sounded in the evening quiet of my solitary house, there was always something to do, something to observe, something to record, something to study, something to put aside in a corner of the mind. There was the ocean in all weathers and at all tides, now gray and lonely and veiled in winter rain, now sun-bright, coldly green and marbled with dissolving foam. There was the marsh with its great congresses, its little companies, its wandering groups, and little family gatherings of winter birds. There was the glory of the winter sky rolling out of the ocean over and across the dunes, constellation by constellation, lonely star by star. To see the night sky in all its divinity of beauty, the world beneath should be lovely too. Else, the great picture is split in halves which no mind can ever really weld into a unity of reverence. I think the nights on which I felt most alone, if I paused to indulge myself in such an emotion, were the nights when southeasterly rains were at work in the dark, immense world outside my door, dissolving in rain and fog, such ice and snow as lingered on after a snowfall or a cold spell had become history. On such southeasterly nights, the fog lay thick on marsh and ocean. The distant lights of Eastham vanished in a universal dark, and on the invisible beach below the dune, great breakers born of fog swell, and the wind rolled up the sands with the slow, mournful pace of stately victims destined to immolation, and toppled over, each one in a heavy, awesome roar that faded to silence before a fellow victim followed on out of the darkness on the sea. Only one sense impression lingered to remind me of the vanished world of man, and that the long, long complaints and melancholy bellowings of vessels feeling their way about miles offshore. But I was not entirely alone. My friends, the Coast Guards at Norset Station, patrolling the beach every night and in all weathers, often came in to see how I was faring, to hand me on a letter or to tell me the news of the Cape. My pleasure in such visits was very real, and between 7:30 and 8 o'clock I always hoped for a step. When one has not spoken to another human being for 24 hours, a little conversation is pleasant exercise, though to the speaker the simplest phrases, even the simple idiom, "come in," may take on a quaint air of being breathless and voluble. Sometimes no one came, and I spent the evening by my fire reading quietly, going over my notes and wondering who it was who walked the beach. It is not easy to live alone, for man is a gregarious creature, especially in his youth. Powerful instincts offer battle to such a way of life, and in utter solitude odd things may happen to the mind. I lived as a solitary, yes, but I made no pretense of acting the conventional hermit of the pious tract and the 18th century romance. With my weekly trips to Orleans to buy fresh bread and butter, my frequent visits to the Overlook, and my conversations with the men on night patrol, a medieval anchorite would have probably regarded me as a dweller in the marketplace. It was not this touch with my fellows, however, which alone sustained me. Dwelling thus upon the dunes, I lived in the midst of an abundance of natural life which manifested itself every hour of the day, and from being thus surrounded, thus enclosed within a great whirl of what one may call the life force, I felt that I drew a secret and sustaining energy. There were times, on the threshold of spring, when the force seemed as real as heat from the sun. A skeptic may smile and ask me to come to his laboratory and demonstrate. He may talk as he will of the secret workings of my own isolated and uninfluenced flesh and blood. But I think that those who have lived in nature and try to open their doors rather than close them on her energies will understand well enough what I mean. Life is as much a force in the universe as electricity or gravitational pull, and the presence of life sustains life. Individuals may destroy individuals, but the life force may mingle with the individual life as a billow of fire may mingle for a moment with a candle flame. But now I must begin to tell of the birds who are wintering on the coast, of the exchange of species which takes place here, and of how all manage to live. As I walk the beach on a bright and blustery January morning, my first impression is one of space, beauty, and loneliness. The summer bird life of the beach has completely disappeared, and at the moment of which I tell, not a single beach bird or seabird, not even a resident gull, is to be seen on the beach along all these empty miles. I walk, and no terns come swooping down at me out of the dunes, scolding me for any intrusion on their immense and ancient privacy. No sandpipers rise at my approach, wheel over the inner breakers, and settle down again 100 yards ahead. Summer residents and autumn migrants of the beach, sandpipers, plovers, yellowlegs, knots, and sanderlings, all have gone south with the sun and are now to be found anywhere from the Carolinas south to Patagonia. The familiar sanderlings lingered surprisingly late. They seemed almost as numerous in October as in August. There were plenty to be seen in November, but in December, flocks were rare, and by Christmas, there were only a few strays and cripples left behind. New Year's Day, on the deserted beach, I surprised a little flock of ruddy turnstones, who took wing on my approach and flew south close along the seaward face of the dunes. I shall always remember this picture as one of the most beautiful touches of color I have ever seen in nature. For the three dominant colors of this bird, who is a little larger than the semi-palmated sandpiper, are black, white, and glowing chestnut red, and these colors are interestingly displayed in patches and bold stripes seen at their best when the bird is flying. The great dunes behind them and the long vista of the beach were cold silver overlaid with that faint, loveliest violet which is the overtone color of the coast. As I watched these decorative birds flying away ahead of me into the vast ocean world, I began thinking of how little has ever been written or said about the loveliness of our North Atlantic birds. There are plenty of books about them. There are a world of kind people who cherish and love them as birds, but there is a lack of printed material and discussion celebrating their qualities of beauty. Such aesthetic appreciation of our shore birds as we have had seems to have reached that showy and unfortunate creature, the wood duck, has been permanently overcome. Now the turnstone is a lovely little bird. The least tern is another. The king eider is a magnificent creature, and there are many more whose beauty deserves comment and attention. A second notion, too, came into my head as I saw the turnstones fly away, that no one really knows a bird until he has seen it in flight. Since my year upon the dunes, spent in a world of magnificent flyers, I have been tempted to believe that the relation of the living bird with its wings folded to the living bird in flight is almost that of the living bird to the same bird stuffed. In certain cases, the difference between the bird on the wing and the bird at rest is so great that one might be watching two different creatures. Not only do colors and new arrangements of colors appear in flight, there is also a revelation of personality. Study your birds on the ground as you will, but once you have thus observed them and studied their loveliness, do not be afraid to clap your hands and send them off into the air. They will take no real alarm and will soon forgive you. Watch birds flying. The tide is going out, and the breakers are shallowing to chiding curls of foam along the edge of the ebb. Gone are the thin-footed, light-winged peoples, the industrious waders, the busy pickup, runabout, and scurry-along folk. South with the sun, along bright beaches and across wide bays, south with the sun along the edge of a continent, with heaven knows what ancient mysteries stirring in their tiny minds and what ancient instincts waking in their veins. As I think of the tropical lands to which these birds have flown, I remember walking one night along a tropical beach in Central America. It was late at night. No one was about. The warm, endless, pouring wind shook a sound like rain out of endlessly agitated palms, and a magnificent full moon sailed through the wind over an ocean and a surf that might have been a liquid and greener moonlight. Suddenly, a flock of little birds rose up on the beach from nowhere, wheeled, fell off a little with the wind, and then disappeared completely into the turbulent splendor. I wonder now if you were by any chance Cape Cod sandpipers, little birds. My beach is empty, but not the ocean beyond. Between the Coast Guard station and Norset Light, a raft of skunk coots is spending the winter. Patches of white on the forehead and the hind neck of the glossy black head of the male are responsible for this local name. The birds sit in the ocean, just seaward of the surf. The Coast Guardsmen say there is a shallow close by and shellfish, and the whole raft rises and falls unconcernedly as the swells roll under it. Sometimes a bird will dive through the oncoming ridge of a breaker and emerge casually on the other side. Sometimes a bird will stand up in the water, flap its wings, and settle down again unconcernedly. There are perhaps 30 birds in this flock. In Thoreau's time, these rafts of coots formed a flock which was practically continuous the whole length of the outer cape. But today, such rafts, though not at all rare, are but occasional. Standing at the door of my house, I watch these winter birds pass and repass, flying well offshore. Now a company of 100 or more old squaws pass, now a tribe of one of the scolder folk, now a pair of eiders come to rest in the ocean directly in front of the forecastle. These birds practically never come ashore during the winter. They eat, sleep, live, and meet together at sea. When you see a sea duck on the beach, you can be sure something is the matter with him. So runs a saying of the Cape, which I had from Captain Nicholson. The only way in which I can observe these winter folks is by using a good glass or by catching a specimen who has got into some kind of trouble and taken refuge on the beach. All these creatures are at a great disadvantage when ashore, and have a world of difficulty trying to launch themselves into the air. They make unwieldy jump after jump, the ox being practically unable to rise at all upon their wings. It was thrilling to walk the beach and catch sight of a bird sitting solitary on the sands. What might it be? What had led it ashore? Could I possibly catch it and give it a careful looking over? The keynote of my strategy lay in the attempt to prevent the birds from getting back into the water. So between them and the surf I would rush, for the birds would begin to move down the slope to the surf the instant they saw or heard or felt me, and I soon learned that a brisk countercharge was worth all the rules and the patient stalking in the world. Then began a furious game of tag, the alarmed bird skittering all over the beach, being gradually driven by me toward the dunes, till I maneuvered him into the angle between the beach and the sandy wall. These ocean peoples live on such little fish as they can seize. They pick up shellfish on shallow areas. They eat certain marine growths. Some have a taste for the local mussel. Unless the winter is an exceptionally severe one, the birds seem to fare well enough. Many stay late, and May is usually at hand before the long lines of scooters fly north again under the command of their feathered admirals. Such is the history of the migrant seafarers of the Cape. A word remains to be said about the residents and the migrants in the marsh.